the grief, dealing with the grief of the loss was a day-to-day process that got easier over time because my focus was no longer on losing my son. My focus now became on honoring his memory. And that was a job in and of itself that kept me motivated and to a large degree task saturated. Don't think that there's not days that sometimes I sit around by myself and I'm not struggling myself with the loss. Well, he liked flying in the clouds and he liked dancing. I'm sitting in a hotel in Atlanta when his girlfriend called, and she said that she'd just gotten a weird phone call from one of his other friends and stated that they thought he may be hurt, and I'm in the area. Do you want me to go check on him? And I said, well, of course I would want you to go check on him. She called me hysterical that he was gone. Of course, my world just fell apart right then and there. So I jumped on the next airplane back to Dallas. That was probably the lowest I've ever felt, because I had to get in uniform to travel back, because I was there on a trip. And I'm getting on an airplane full of people that was delayed waiting specifically for me, because I reached out to the captain and I said, I am not going to make departure time. And my son just killed himself, and I've got to be on that airplane. And he texted me back and he said, we will not leave without you.
This is Alone and Unafraid. Welcome back to Alone and Unafraid, where we explore the intersections of everyday life, mental health, and mindset with ordinary people who have or are now facing incredible challenges. My name is Thad King, and I'm your host. Joining me today, Tyler Huckett's in the house, co-hosting per the usual. Tyler, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Today we're chatting with Joey Johnson. Joey grew up in rural Louisiana, where he was inspired by his uncle, a crop duster pilot, to pursue a career in aviation. He started his journey with American Eagle before landing with a legacy carrier, American Airlines, where he also serves as an FAA Designated Examiner. Beyond his impressive career in aviation, Joey is a father and a man of many talents, from playing musical instruments to beekeeping. Most importantly, Joey is the founder of the Ashton Johnson Memorial Cloud Dancer Scholarship, which is a foundation he started to honor his middle son, Ashton, who tragically took his own life in October of 2021. Joey, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So before we get into this, it's kind of an interesting story of how small the world is and how you make connections when you least admit it. I was actually out in Fort Worth, or I guess west of Fort Worth, on a TV show, shooting a TV show where I was flying a helicopter in the TV show, and Thomas Trejo, who's a friend of yours, just happened to be sitting under a tree with me out in August in Texas, when it was probably 97 degrees and we're all dying under this only oak tree out in the field that we had, and happened to strike up a conversation with Thomas, and we kind of hit it off and had a lot of things in common. Fun fact, his brother-in-law served in the 160th with Tyler and myself, which is just super strange that I intimately know I know his brother-in-law well. So Thomas, we start talking, and somehow this podcast came up, and Thomas goes, I know a guy you need to talk to. And he told me about you, and he told me about your story and your son's story. And it resonated deeply with me. And so I asked if he thought it would be okay if I reached out to you, and he said you'd be all about it. So here we are. So it's just kind of interesting how small the world is, and how God works in mysterious ways, if you will, how people come into your life. So I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us tonight, and let's get into it. So you're not originally from Texas, right? You're originally from Louisiana.
Yeah, born and raised in a small town in rural Louisiana. My dad joke is I'm from Wedlock, Louisiana, and most people ask where that is, and I tell them, well, actually, I was born just out of wedlock. But so that usually
Is
gets a
that the
lot.
real name of the town, Wedlock?
No, no, no. The town is called Oak Grove. It's in the upper northeast corner of Louisiana. So by Louisiana standards, I'm north of I-10, so that makes me a Yankee by Louisiana definitions.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's where I grew up. We were farmers up that way.
Yeah. It's interesting that people from the South, like I'm originally from North Carolina, and people from Georgia think people from North Carolina are Yankees. And being from North Carolina, that's offensive to us. So,
Well,
which is hilarious because my wife's from New York. So,
it's people from New York are from way down south from where I'm from.
oh
So
yeah, you're from as far, I don't, is Vermont. I
it's
mean,
parallel with New York. But
yeah,
you have to move left, which is basically the south if you're from up there and you went to public school.
yeah, it happens.
So, but
Uh,
yeah, that's it. Right next to the Mississippi River, so it was God's country. A lot hunting and fishing was abundant. Growing up, and of course we were farmers, so we were outdoors a lot. The worst punishment you could get as a kid growing up there was being made to stay in the house, whereas
yeah,
today the punishment is get outside.
yeah, yeah. Is that and we had talked earlier. You guys were farming. I'm assuming in that part of the world. I mean, I don't know. Back then, was it soybean? What were you guys farming up there?
So soybeans and cotton were most prevalent back then. Winter crops were wheat and oats. Rice and corn came on later. There were some areas, portions of Louisiana. In fact, the town that I had a cannery in it because sweet potatoes also was very predominant at one time.
Yeah,
And that's making a comeback now as well because the soil is just right, for the potato slips and stuff.
yeah. And so your uncle was crop. Was he a part time crop duster just on your guys' farm, or was he doing it for
Oh, he was full
everybody?
time. He was full time. He had a few airplanes, and so growing up as a kid on the farm, I would see the crop dusters, and there was plenty of airplanes, and in my childhood growing up, I had a lot of family members that were pilots as well. Some of them just private pilots, others a little bit further than that. And then Rayville was an area, and Monroe, I think, was originally an old old military installation, and I know that Rayville was where a lot of training took place. Just because of some other relatives that I had that were in the military, way back then during the war and stuff.
So your uncle was crop dusting. And back then, what time period are we talking about when
So
you
I
first
was
got
born in
interested?
'66. We're looking at the mid '70s.
Yeah,
My first airplane ride, I was 5 years old, and it was in one of the crop dusters, just basically standing up in the side of it. And so, that was what got me hooked at a very early age. And then, of course, my two cousins that were my uncle's boys. Every time I went to spend the night, I was always like, "Let's go fly in the airplanes. Let's go fly in the airplanes." So they would take me out in the airplane, and one of them had his license, the other one didn't. So the one that had his license, he would let me, control the aircraft. We would fly around a little bit, and the other one would just start the engine up, and we'd run up and down the grass strip, in the airplane. But that was still fun to me. Just anything to do with that airplane.
yeah. It's interesting how you get the bug, and that's all you want to do. I've got a few friends they get really upset when you say crop dusting. It's ag pilot or spray pilot. They get that the crop duster is no longer. I guess it's offensive in
Well,
2024.
it's a term that's gone away with time. It's a lot like stewardess.
Yeah.
It calls them flight attendants a stewardess anymore.
Yeah. So you got into aviation. Did you know when you were seeing your uncle, was that, hey, this is it, I know this is what I'm going to do, or did you just kind of fall into it by association?
No, that I knew that was what I was going to do. I mean, at that time, all the Apollo moonshots were going off. The space exploration was huge, and that was actually my aspiration. Was I wanted to be an astronaut, and I was bound and determined to be an astronaut. And when the space program shut down right after the oil crisis in the late '70s, then it changed to, well, I'm just going to go in the military, be a fighter pilot, come out, be an airline pilot. You know.
Yeah. And so you eventually kind of worked your way, and you started out probably from what I read, where I was reading on your background, you started out at back then it was probably pretty hard to get to a legacy carrier, not like it is today. Not saying that it's
That's
easy,
correct.
but
Yeah.
it was a long road back then.
Yeah, it was a very long road. The military was probably the fastest route, to go through. If you chose to go civilian, well, then they wanted to see a 4-year degree and thousands of hours of flight experience and stuff like that. But as the war pilots began to retire, the demand became higher, and so the requirements for the 4-year degree became obvious that the degree wasn't really necessary. This was more of a trade, a skill, than it was an education. In that respect, I'm not trying to lessen it. What I'm saying is this is something you can go to a vocational school and get a very good education in a skill that doesn't necessarily require a degree, and I think that's kind of has become more predominant now.
Yeah, I always wondered why, as pilots need a degree, and I know that there's probably good reasons for it, but if you have the stick and rudder skills and the mental capacity to, people. I remember growing up, I always wanted to be a pilot, and I remember my 7th grade science teacher, who eventually was actually my 10th grade science teacher again, had told me in 10th grade I'll never be a pilot because I'm not good at math, or I wasn't good at science, and I showed her. But the biggest thing that, we were doing complex algebra, and she's like, you're going to need the, trigonometry as a pilot. And it's just addition and subtraction, multiplication and division. And now the computer does it mostly for you. So it's always interesting how things change in this industry. So you came up from, you flew corporate, got into, and you're probably your first big break, I guess, was American Eagle. Is that
correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I went the civilian route. I wound up going to college for a year, and then dropping out of college and going to basically a trade school, a flight school, that specialized in flight training, and finished up all my ratings there, and then worked as an instructor for the better part of 2 years, and then eventually landed a job, alternating right and left seat in a King Air, which got me the turbine time that I needed, and built my total time up to get me competitive now without the degree. And so once you got to that point, well, now it was now they would start to look at you. And then of course I got hired with American Eagle, and the promise at that time was in 5 years you'll be at mainline. And of course 4 years later, all the main lines were furloughing.
Yeah, this would have been in the
early to mid 90s, so 93, 94 time range. American was furloughing. They were farming from Eagle, but because they had started furloughing, now they were no longer hiring. And a lot of the other legacy carriers still had the stipulation they wanted to see a 4-year degree, whereas American would have hired you without it, because now you're a known entity coming into the company.
Yeah. Yeah, this was back in the time for the younger guys, Tyler, that this is after Desert Storm, and the country went into a recession, and everybody, the military cut way back. People were, I remember we had those guys that sell those vacuums, those rainbow vacuums. You guys ever seen those?
The
Kirby's. Yeah, they come door to door.
Yeah, Kirby.
Yeah. They're like supposed to be really good vacuums, like they're like $2,000 vacuum or something before Dyson, I guess. But this guy came to our house to sell this rainbow vacuum, and my dad was kind of talking to him, and turns out the guy was a master sergeant in the Army that got rifted out of the Army with 17 years and couldn't retire. It was that the mid 90s were just an economic or early 90s, I should say, it was just terrible. So you end up you did eventually make your way to American, and were you already a check airman for the company before at American Eagle?
Yeah. I actually spent almost 22 years total at American Eagle. So hired in 89 with the expectation to move over in the 93, 94 range, but then the furlough was on. The recall started in 97, 98. And at that time I was in the middle of a divorce. So I chose to put that behind me before I made the move. over to mainline. So I got on, at that time, we had just signed a contract with American Eagle to set up the regional jets and what we called a flow-through program, to where once you qualified on the jet and served your time, then you moved over. So it was a 2-year lock-in. Unfortunately, the delivery schedule was taking some time and the training was taking some time. So it wasn't like you got on the jet right away and then 2 years later you moved over. In fact, it took almost 2 years before I actually got moved over onto the jet, just because of the slowness of the deliveries and the training involved. And once I did get on it in 2000, well, then you had a 2-year lock-in. So at that point, I had 11 years with the company, and I was like, it's all good, 10 years here. I'm gonna wind up getting, 30 plus years, roughly 30 years at the main line, and well, then a year into my flow through or lock in, 9/11 happened, and then came what we call the lost decade. So that's where there was a lot of things that happened during the lost decade. People were that they had made a lot of life decisions and career choices and stuff like that, and it just completely upended all of that. And so people were. It was amazing. Is the best way I can describe it, and that's not necessarily a good amazing either, because the divorce rate was through the roof, the suicide rate was through the roof. Airline pilots committing suicide on layovers. It was just absolute crazy chaos during that time. And but finally things started to turn around in 07, 08. And by the time they got spooled up again in 2010, well, now they began to call the flow-throughs that had been waiting for a decade now to move over. So ultimately I moved over in 2010. So I'll have 24 years, 25 years, 24 years at mainline, whereas I would have had 34 years at mainline had I gotten over there before 9/11. That being said, if I had gotten over there pre 9/11, some of my friends who did go over pre 9/11, although they're senior to me now, they suffered tremendously during that 10 years while they sat junior reserve in a base that they didn't want to be and commuted back and forth to work. And I think this is what drove a lot of divorces and a lot of that suicide rate, was people's careers were decimated. And they're like, I put all this time and effort and money into getting this far, only to wind up broken on food stamps, living out of a hut somewhere in LaGuardia. It was a bad time.
Yeah, a lot of people that don't understand the airline culture. When you talk about commuting, this isn't jump in your car and drive down to the airport. This is, you might live in Nashville and you get on a plane and catch it to JFK or LaGuardia, and then when you're off, that's on you where you got to sleep, right? And they have correct. These crash pads. Or can you that? That's
yes, I had a crash pad. I spent maybe 6 or 8 months commuting when I first went over to American, because although I carried a lot of my seniority with me from the flow through, it wasn't enough to hold Dallas just yet. So even though I lived in Dallas, I was having to commute to exactly that, to LaGuardia, for about the first 6 to 9 months. And so yeah, on my day off, I would have to leave on the preferably as late as possible on the last flight going out, just depended on what my showtime was the next day. And then arrive in New York, and then get on the bus or get on the transit system and make your way to your crash pad. And then in the crash pad, there might be, another 6 or 8 guys sleeping there. It was the place that we had was a, hang on, how do I cancel these text notifications that keep coming across? Anyway, there might be another 6 or 8 guys that are all crashing there as well. And we called them hot bunks, which basically each room had 2 sets of bunk beds in it. And it was a 3-bedroom condo. The second floor was. The first floor was the same thing. And the third floor was all for the flight attendants. It was a 3-bedroom on the top floor. And this was back in 2010. So we were paying roughly $300 a month for a hot bunk, which meant when you got out of that bunk and went to work, you took your sheets up and put them in a box and shoved them in a closet, and someone else came in that night and put their sheets on the bed, and they slept on that bed. That's what we mean by a hot bunk.
Oh, God, that sounds like Army life, but worse. Yeah. But you got to pay for it.
Or Navy
And then
life
when
on the
you would
ship.
come back from your trip, if you couldn't get a flight home and you had to spend the night in your crash pad, well, you went back and you hoped that there was a hot bunk that was open that you could throw your sheets on and sleep for the night. If not, you were crashing on the couch.
Oh, it wasn't the same bunk every time. It's just whatever's open.
Whatever's open. That's correct.
And so you're talking about the stress put on all these pilots. Is it just the stress from being home, or were there other things going on? It's like, I'm completely ignorant to airline life and pilot life. So you're talking about all this stress, and that's just basically from having to live in that kind of situation.
Yeah, they're living in that situation. So we're a lot of the guys that came on just before 9/11, some of those guys were career military. They just retired 20 years out of the military. And so they had that little bit of money coming in, but others not so much. Maybe they had done their commitment, their 8 or 10 year commitment, whatever they had to whatever branch they were coming from. And so they had a good life in the military and went to class. And we had this VP of flight at one time that in every new hire class, he would welcome everybody with open arms and he would say, welcome future millionaires, and so the expectation levels will set very high as to what you were going, what you were moving into. And then all of a sudden 9/11 happens. And when 9/11 happens, then everything is upended. And now no one is, I finally found those notifications and turned them off. And now no one is moving. So the expectation that you're only going to spend 3 to 6 months in New York commuting to a hot bunk is now turned into a 5-year, 6-year, 7-year commute. And you're not moving up the seniority list, and you're stuck on these lower pay scales as a first officer for the first 3 years, what we called the B scale back then. And so you were barely making enough to get by. And so your family begins to suffer because you made some life decisions like, hey, I just got hired at the airline and they told me, welcome future millionaires. You're going to need a dump truck to haul off all the money. So let's go buy ourselves our retirement home, and let's go buy you a new car, and let's get the kids' college all set up and all this. And so all these career decisions and life decisions were being made, and then everything just gets completely upended. And now you're sitting here holding the bag. You've got a job that's barely paying you anything. Your schedule sucks. You can't bid the days off you want. Everything is all seniority based. So if you're at the bottom of the seniority list, you are living in the sludge. You're not getting Christmas. You're not getting the anniversaries. You're not getting the birthdays off. And you're missing all of these life events that occurs in your family that you can't replace. There's no going back in time when you miss your child's first recital or your young boy's first football game. And then you miss the next one, and you miss the next recital and the dance recital and the spelling bee. And then you miss an anniversary, and then you miss Christmas. You see what I'm saying? And then it begins to compound itself. And this went on for nearly 10 years. Halfway into this, 5 or 6 years, we were losing pilots at a rate of 6 per month industry wide.
And when you say losing, we're talking suicide, is it, or like quit? Okay, yeah. And I think it's important for people to understand that. And you alluded to this in our pre-show conversation, that stress and these kinds of events actually it is trauma. There's no virtue signaling in the trauma space. There's no like, my trauma is more traumatic than your trauma. It's whatever you're dealing with at the time. And those kinds of things, when you think that the only way out is to take yourself out of the equation because your family's going to be better off because you're stuck in LaGuardia living in a crash pad making $50,000 a year and you can't make ends meet. This is the reality of a lot of people, and I'm not just saying that the reality of airline pilots. I'm saying in any spectrum of any job or reality of a person, there are people right now that we all know that could be dealing with something that they think that their trauma is so much that they want to take themselves out of the equation. And that's why it's so important to have conversations with the people and get engaged and ask them, if you even suspect it. So, like I was telling you earlier in the show, a guy that I knew, I had no idea that he had felt that way. And so I think it's important to realize, like you said, that trauma comes in all flavors, and it doesn't, we happen to have a lot of military and first responders on this podcast, but that's not the end all be all. That, my trauma isn't better than your trauma type situation. So, man, I actually didn't know that was going on back then. I mean, I'd always heard about, ATC guys, but I didn't know about the pilots.
Yeah, our union, and as others, started a program we called Wingman, um, which was it was a way for you to disclose, um, discreetly, that, no questions, no judgment. Man, I need help. I'm struggling here. And so they would pull the pilot offline, and they would try to get them the help, because the um, the stigma in it is if it was deemed that you had a mental health issue, then you weren't legal to fly in the FAA's mind. There was a medical deficiency here, and therefore you weren't allowed to fly. So we started the Wingman program as kind of a discreet, non-disclosure. Well, and I wasn't at American when that started, but I'm glad it's there, and it's still there today. Um, but the people that started that up was doing it to help our guys. To say, hey, we know, you can't. You left a good military career, you left a good corporate career, or you just went through school and you got hundreds of thousands in student loans, and now you've been based in New York or LA or some other, Philadelphia, some Chicago, some other high end city where the cost of living is enormous. I can't imagine any place worse than New York when it comes to cost of living. But but you're not from there, so now you've got the culture element. You're not from there, and now you're having to commute there, and maybe you live on the West Coast, and somewhere in an inexpensive place, or maybe you live in the heart of America, where it's, the cost of living is very inexpensive, but it's a 2-leg commute because you're in Pineville, Arkansas, or somewhere like that, right? So now you got to go to Little Rock just to catch a flight to Dallas, just to catch a flight to New York, So you're driving, this is an all-day commute just to get to work. And then there's a weather event in New York, and then the flight cancels. And so you don't get there on time, and then the phone rings, and it's crew scheduling, and they want to know where you're at because they have a trip assignment for you and you're not on there. And so you miss the trip, and then the next phone call you get the chief pilot going, hey, you're on notice because you didn't make it to your trip. And you try to explain to him, well, the reason I didn't make it to my trip is because, and at that time there was no commuter policy that said, that was kind of a ace in the hole that would get you out of trouble, so to speak. The expectation is you signed up for the job, you knew what the conditions were when you signed up for it, and you're not at work one more time and you're out.
Yeah, I think that there's some parallels there between the military, at least on the aviation side of the military, because it's the same way. If you raise your hand and say you're struggling, they're going to down you, and you're not going to be able to fly until. I think the process is a little bit easier to get back up than the FAA, and I think the FAA still is behind in terms of medical for mental things. But I didn't know that about the Wingman program, that the union, and that's a union program, I'm assuming, not a corporate, not it's not an American.
No, it's sponsored wholeheartedly by the the pilots union, and each union has, I would assume, the other airlines and their individual unions have their own. I know ALPA has a program. American's union is called APA, Allied Pilots Association, and I think they probably were one of the first ones to jump out in front of this and start that program.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's good.
Do you know anybody who's used it? Sorry.
Say it again.
Do you know anybody who's used that program?
I do.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just for mental health reasons as well. I mean,
sure.
Let's say, for example, your wife or your significant other, it could be your husband, I guess, or your mother, it could be a close family member has, they've suffered an accident, or they've become, ill to debilitating illness. We see that a lot, and then the pilots are, their mind is not in the game because they're worried about their child that has cancer, or their wife that has cancer, or their husband who was involved in a serious motorcycle accident and is now debilitated, or a mother-in-law or a father-in-law, or a mother or father or grandmother that is suffering from diabetes, or early onset dementia or something like that, or someone has a heart attack. So these are all life issues that the average person day to day, 9 to 5, drive to work, drive home, not a big deal, right? If you have an issue, you just pull over, you stop. You don't get to do that at 39,000 feet halfway across the North Atlantic in the middle of the night. And all of a sudden your mind turns to, is my wife okay? Are my children okay? Is my mother-in-law okay? So these were the problems that they were working through in the wingman program. So it wasn't just necessarily that the pilot himself had an issue, but maybe someone in the family had an issue. So they're there for that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I always get concerned with programs like that, not that people are scared to use them, right? So if there's some for first responders, police, or firefighters, or we had some mental health people, I guess, in our unit, which I didn't really even know about that until you brought it up in one of the podcasts. We had no idea that we had access to somebody like that at work. But I still think, like, for some people, there's probably still like, I might lose my job. I can't afford to lose my job. So I don't even know if I should take care of this program. But I would assume that if it's a union program, it's probably a lot more protected than like
it
a,
is
a corporate approved
very
program or
much
something.
is. So, and that was the whole idea, was to eliminate the stigma associated with, when we say no judgment, meaning no one's going to look down their nose and go, you're weak because you couldn't deal with it. So that makes you weak. So that, and I think that, is probably a lot of it, that people, they have their own struggles internally about, well, how are other people going to view me if I choose to go this route? And so they choose not to go the route, and their problems begin to compound, as a result of that.
Yeah, I think it's important to highlight to the folks probably listening to this that might be in this situation, that they are scared, that they feel weak, is go back and listen to the podcast, the ones that we've had on here, like episode 6 with Nick O'Kelly. And you tell me that if a Green Beret and a special operations helicopter pilot is raising his hand, there is a lot more mental toughness to raise your hand and say, I have a problem, than to not, like, you. I don't know anybody that we've ever known. If I had $1 for every text that Tyler and I get from folks that we know, of guys saying, hey, I had no idea. Thank you for, I got one today. A guy,
it's daily.
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 I listened to the podcast yesterday. I had no idea. I really needed to hear that. It was fortuitous. The timing was perfect. So if folks are listening to this and they feel that way, just know that when you do raise your hand, you're often viewed the opposite of what you think. People actually will help you, and they don't pass judgment, because frankly, everybody deals with some form of this. I don't care where you're from, how you were raised, no matter how much money you had, how much money you didn't have, you will deal with some form of mental health in your life, if not a lot. And the more we normalize that this is I'm going to stop short of medical condition, but that it's a normal part of the process of life. And it's good to see that unions out there are doing stuff like that, and the military is starting to come around. I would hope the FAA would make some type of program that would, because this is how people make their money. And when you take the livelihood of somebody that's already suffering due to, extenuating circumstances, and then you say, oh, by the way, you can't make money, that it's digging the hole worse. It's making it worse. So hopefully we see the FAA make those changes. So you're doing then and all this stuff where you're talking about where you're commuting and doing this stuff. Your kids are probably young at that age. I'm assuming, right? This is in those formative years.
Yeah. So when I was, I can't say that I've had the golden career, but I certainly hadn't had the rusty career either. I've been somewhere in between because I've caught a lot of the backside of the tide, not too many of the front sides. There was a huge hiring boom in the 80s. There's a friend of mine right now that's only slightly older than me that got hired in 85, and he's number 39 on the seniority list of 15,000, and
there's 15,000 pilots at American.
At American, that's correct.
Holy, that
I had no idea.
Yeah,
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of pilots.
Yeah.
I guess it makes sense because there's 1.5 million planes going overhead every day.
Yeah, and and then a friend of mine that I was telling you about that chose to move over to mainline in '98 when the hiring started back up. Although a lot of people were on the flow through program like myself, they elected to forego that and just try to go straight through the front door. And some of them got hired, some of them did not. And as such, this friend of mine that was a new hire with me, she's 3,000 numbers senior to me now as a result of making that move. So you make the best choice with your situation at the time, and hope it all plays out. To that effect, although she's 3,000 numbers senior to me, she went through a lot of that being stuck on an airplane she didn't like, in a base that she didn't like, commuting back and forth. Meanwhile, I stayed behind and I was super senior in my position. So I was making more money actually in that position than I was as a low seniority, junior first officer at American Airlines. So as a senior captain and check airman at the Eagle, I was actually doing better. So I didn't really, and I wasn't missing a lot of the holidays and things like that. So that worked to my favor. But then long term, it's obviously had a more negative effect because I won't see nearly as many years on a wide body aircraft as what they have. And that is where your earnings is as an airline pilot. If you're looking at it from a monetary standpoint, that's where the money is once you make it to the international wide body, that's when you're making the big bucks.
And right now you're flying the Airbus A321.
Yeah, so we call it the 320 family because we actually operate all three of them. So we operate the 19, the 20, and the 21. It's a common type rating when you get it. So you're allowed, the 319 is, it's 128, I think, is the total. Whereas the 320, which was the original design, is a 150-seat airplane. And the 321 non-neos are the 190 some odd passengers, just short of 200. They bought that one to replace the 75 because the 75 was an aging fleet. And but yeah, that's what I fly, and I fly international on that. So there's an override when you fly international, extra pay for doing international, and the overwater stuff. So it's good money, but it's certainly not the wide body money.
Yeah, I think for the folks that don't know, in the Airbus line of products is, and I'm not an airline pilot, so I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night, but I got a few friends that fly 320s, and they told me the automation on that thing is just insane of what it can do. So I'm assuming you enjoy flying it, and it's The
challenge in the Airbus is staying ahead of the computers. You're not a traditional Boeing pilot anymore. It doesn't require a lot of stick and rudder skills. It requires a more mastery of the intelligence of the systems.
Yeah, cockpit management stuff.
Yeah, cockpit management, flight management through a computer versus hands-on, and staying ahead of it, because sometimes you think you're programming one thing and then it does something different, and you're kind of twisting your head looking at it, going, "No, why is it doing that? That's not what I asked for." And so then there's usually a correction. You pause it for a moment and then reprogram and then continue on.
So all the airline stuff, this is all going on. And now you're living in base, basically, right? You're out of DFW, I'm assuming. So
yes, based in Dallas.
Yes. So you're fairly close. So life is going good. And how this time your son, he decides, your middle son Ashton decides, after high school to join the Army. And do you know how he got to that decision to join the Army, or,
Yeah. So just like most 90s kids, because they were all 90s products. His older brother was born in 91. He was born in 92. So just short of 20 years later, they're coming out, in uh, right around, let's see, it was, that would have been 90, Kegel would have been 98, 99. No, 2009 graduation. Ashton would have been a year or two behind that. So, they're in that era, if you will. And we were seeing a lot of the failure to launch with those kids at that age, right? So they get out of high school, they go to college, they waste their first year. Not all kids, obviously, but I was a single parent. We got divorced when they were 6 and 8, and I wound up with custody of the two boys. And so they stayed with me and visited mom every other weekend. And so, and like, I tried to be a good co-parent, and I'm sure she probably thought she was trying to be a good co-parent, but we didn't co-parent well together. And so that put the boys in the middle of that struggle. And so once I think they just wanted out conflict resolution. Once they were out of high school, they're like, I'm out of here. And so both of them went 1 year of college, and they followed pretty much in my footsteps, dropped out, but they didn't have, unlike me, they didn't even have any strong aspirations. Like, this is what I want to do. So the purpose of my dropping out was to go focus on what I wanted to do. Whereas they just was like, I'm just ready to get the hell out of the house and get away from all this conflict. And so Ashton wound up bouncing from job to job, and ultimately found himself in a situation financially, amongst other things, where he was out of options. He had, while he was in high school, he had started playing paintball, and he got really good. He was very much an athlete. It didn't matter what sport he participated in, he succeeded and was very successful. In fact, when he started paintball, I was a little disappointed because he was playing on the Dallas Junior Stars team and traveling all over Texas and Oklahoma as a goalie. And we were practicing at Reunion Arena with Marty Turco and all those guys back then. And so I just knew he was the next great Dallas Stars goalie. And he decided, no, Dad, I'm going to go play paintball. I'm like, what the hell is paintball? And
yeah, they have like professional paintball guys, right?
That is correct. And he ultimately wound up a professional paintball player. He was named up and coming star when he was like 16, in high school. And so, and like his brother, I helped his brother get a job at QT because it was one of the better, after school jobs that you could get. They paid well. It was certainly beat flipping burgers. It was a clean job, and it was a couple of blocks from the house. And the manager loved them, said they were both hardworking kids and this, that, and the other. But Ashton's love of paintball began to interfere with his work, and ultimately he winds up losing his job because he was missing shifts, traveling down to San Marcos to practice with his team. He was playing for San Antonio X Factor. And and we've got quite a few stories, that he's running around with a bunch of 20-something-year-olds all over the country, and here he is 17. So naturally, they're dragging him into places he probably shouldn't be. He's getting kicked out of places that I know he shouldn't be. Things like that are happening, and a year of school, and the grades were just horrible. So I told him, I was like, well, you're going to have to do something, and he's like, well, I want to move back home and go back to school. And I said, well, that ain't happening. We played that game. I put you through a year of college, and you washed out of college, and all the money we gave you to go to school, you spent it on paintball gear. So that's certainly not happening. And he goes, well, what am I supposed to do? And I said, well, maybe you go down and talk to the military recruiter. If you need a place to live, shelter and food while you go to school and learn a skill that's going to provide for you, then maybe you need to go talk to those guys because they'll do it for you. The funny thing he said to me was, you don't love me. And I said, no, I do love you. And that's exactly why we're doing this. It's called tough love, And so we went down and talked to the recruiter, and he tried to get in the Navy initially, and he had broken his ankle back when he was a teenager, and he still had the metal in his ankle. And so the Navy was having a really hard time with this, fact that he had metal in his ankle. And his idea was, I'm going to go in. And he was doing bodybuilding at that time, so I can't imagine. I don't know what the doctors at MEPS were thinking. I mean, if I can send you some pictures later of what this kid looked like, he was absolutely ripped. He was Arnold Schwarzenegger's clone. And when he went to sign up, and he says, I'm going to be a firefighter in the Navy, and I'm going to come out and I'm going to be a firefighter, And well, fortunately, I guess the Navy refused him because of the metal. And the Army guy says, don't you know, son, there's no fires on metal ships, right? And so he goes, and with those ASVAB scores that you have, you qualify for anything that the Army has, including signing bonuses.
Classic
So,
Army.
yeah. And so he sat down and he started looking through the MOSs, and he was looking not at what the job was, but at the signing bonus. How big is my signing bonus going to be? Because he was all about the money, and at that time in his life. And so the recruiter, to his credit, I will say, unlike most used car salesmen, said, don't be that guy. Don't be the guy that goes after the money. You need to get a skill that's going to provide for you when you get out. And he goes, look, I can pick you out several here that pay a bonus. It's not going to be what you're thinking, but that bonus right there is associated with a gunslinger, and there's no gunslinger jobs when you come out of the Army. And and I think that resonated with him. So he took the 14 Golf, which was an air defense specialist. I believe it was roughly a $20,000 bonus and a 4-year term. So he went in 2016, and he went to Relax in Jackson, I think they call it, which is Fort Jackson.
Oh, they sure do.
Yeah.
Tyler knows all about that. I actually I went to basic training twice at Fort Jackson, and then when I reclassed to the infantry, I had to, due to administrative screw up, I did it all over again as an E4 at Benning. It was ridiculous. That's a whole.
You had
podcast.
The last hard class too, right?
Yeah, it was. Everything after me was weak sauce.
Yeah.
Well, he had a great drill sergeant, and he really enjoyed basic training. And he went to Lawton for his AIT. And once he got finished there, he got assigned.
That's Oklahoma for the folks. Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
Yeah. And then he got assigned to Fort Bliss down in El Paso, which was great because now he's worst case scenario, he's an 8-hour drive to go visit, And once he got in there, his commanding officer, I think, was a CW 2, Chief Warrant 2. And the CW2 was a Black Hawk pilot and was working on getting his fixed wing ratings. And Ashton told him he goes, well, my dad is a designated examiner and an airline pilot. And now all of a sudden, Ashton was a commodity to this CW2, and so was I. So he began to say, well, let's meet your dad and let's talk. And so we developed a little bit of a relationship there. And Ashton was probably getting some courtesies that wasn't extended to everyone else. So we were seeing him on a fairly regular basis.
Yeah, if I had a soldier that his dad was a DPE.
Yeah, right.
I would, hey, what's going on over there?
Yeah. So anyway, he told Ashton, he said, I can get you into a helicopter and a warrant officer slot if you want it. You just need to learn to fly. So he came home and told me that. Well, I immediately went and bought a trainer aircraft, and we started teaching him how to fly. He would come in on the weekends. He'd get released, come in on the weekends, and we'd go train and then send him back, on Sunday, so that he'd make roll call come first thing Monday morning. And then he got deployed before he got his everything out, got all of his license out of the way. So he went over to Afghanistan, and at the end of 2016, and he spent about 8 months over there, I think, somewhere in that neighborhood. And while he was there, Trump dropped the Moab. So he called me and told me about that. He actually pulled his phone out and was videoing the land and showing it to me. And he said, "Do you see that flat spot over there?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Yeah, it was a mountain there yesterday." And then he called me once to tell me that 30 of his battle buddies had either been killed or injured when a suicide bomber walked into the base. And then he called me one day from a bunker saying that they had just gotten hit by a mortar, and it was 120 out, and they were all sitting inside a concrete bunker. He was in Gamberry, which is they call them FSOBs or FOBs, strategic forward operating base or something like that.
Yeah, FOB, yeah.
And but when he got deployed, his unit was deployed originally. The infantry unit was deployed, and he did not get sent over because they didn't need him. they wound up calling him individually when a staff sergeant had a death in the family and had to come home. So they sent him to replace the staff sergeant, and he gets over there, and the staff sergeant was a airspace battle management guy, and he's like, "Well, I don't know how to do this. I was never taught this." And I think the comment made was, "You're in the Army now." Isn't that what they say?
Yeah, and his and now that you said that, I've pieced together it all makes sense now. He was in an infantry brigade, and each brigade has an airspace battle manager, and it's usually made up of a pilot that's got an additional duty to come down to the infantry, usually a staff sergeant or an E6, sometimes an E7, and then like a private. And those 3 to 4 guys run the airspace where the infantry unit is operating. And they usually like to pick air defense guys because those guys know what airspace management is, because they're shooting missiles through the air. And so now it completely makes sense what he was doing and how that all went together. So, I totally, that's accurate. So
that's what he was doing while he was over there, and then finally got to come home, and then he finished out the remainder of his contract. So I think he wound up getting out in late 2019, and then started going to school. And then shortly after he does his first year, we're full blown COVID in 2020, and so now the VA starts telling them that they're not going to pay their BAH, basic housing allowance and stuff. Because they're going to school from home as a result of COVID. So this is putting him in a bit of a pinch, financially. And how am I supposed to do this? I went over there, I put my life on the line, and now they're doing this to me, and so on. In the meantime, he also indicated that while he was going to school, he said, I want to fly. I'm not 100%. I want to fly for a living, but I definitely want to fly, and I want to do something in aviation. But I may very well decide to be, the professional pilot, like you. He goes, I just don't want to miss all those holidays and birthdays and that kind of stuff, And I told him, I said, there's other things that you can do in aviation, flying wise, that wouldn't necessarily require you to be away like that. There's tons of things that you can do. And I said, so my suggestion to you is, if you're going to go to college, get a logistics degree in aviation or business management. And then that's going to open the door into a variety of different things. And then having your pilot's license on top of it is really going to make for, an easy entry. And so he's going to school. He's doing that. We start training him again. He gets soloed, and then he gets hired by one of the subcontractors at Lockheed Martin. And they were working on they worked on the F-35 simulator. So that's what he was doing. When he passed away, he was working on that, and he had just started that job. I mean, he'd only been there 2-3 months, and he was so excited. He's like, I've never made this much money in my life. And that was one of the things I reminded him. I said, don't you remember what the recruiter said? If you take this training through the Army, they will be lined up at the door trying to hire you because you have a skill that they need, and, I just remember how his eyes lit up when this recruiter was telling him all that. Because again, like at that time in his life, he was all about the money. He stressed over money a lot, and I'm not sure why. Because we didn't struggle, by any means. So I don't know where that came from.
Do you think that? And I would assume that his experiences in Afghanistan probably played a role in where his mental headspace was at. And I don't mean necessarily combat in Afghanistan, but when you get out of the military, it's a Thursday, and you're going to get out. You get out on a Friday, and Monday you wake up and you don't have a sense of purpose anymore. There's not money coming into your bank account. Your world is kind of upended, and everybody goes through that. And I think, or I wonder if he got caught up in the perfect storm of loss of purpose, trying to make your way, trying to figure out which way is up. COVID happens. You take, everything just. Do you think that's what happened? That everything just stacked up on him, or were there any signs that you saw?
No, we didn't see. We didn't see this coming at all. There were no that I could tell. Um, I do know that at the funeral, his VA guy came to the funeral, and um, he cried and cried and cried, and he said, "I'm so sorry, Mr. Johnson." He said, "Ashton talked me off the ledge not 6 months ago, and I wasn't there for him." And he goes, I had been on the phone with him that day, that morning, for probably an hour, and when we hung up, all was good.
Yeah.
And he goes, and then that afternoon, I get the phone call.
I can't imagine as a father how that felt for you and how you, I mean, it makes me kind of choke up right now thinking about it, but how did you process that, and how did that I'm assuming you'd mentioned in the pre-show that it came out at the funeral is how you kind of invented the Ashton Johnson scholarship
Yeah.
or foundation. How did you process that to get from the literally the worst thing ever, I'm assuming, in your entire life, that was the worst moment of your life? How did you move from that to where you are today, and how did you do it? Or
Well, I didn't. I guess looking back, I mean, I can see where some people would see, well, he did this, and then he did this, and then he took this step and took that step. To me, it was almost um, it was an on the go, on the fly kind of deal. I mean, I'm sitting in a hotel in Atlanta when his girlfriend called, which I guess they weren't technically boyfriend girlfriend because they had separated, but they were kind of working through some issues they were having. And she said that she had just gotten a weird phone call from one of his other friends, and stated that they thought he may be hurt. Um, and I'm in the area. Do you want me to go check on him? And I said, well, of course I would want you to go check on him. And after I hang up with her, I try to call 2 or 3 times. He doesn't answer. I text him. He doesn't respond. I call my wife and I go, have you heard from him today? She goes, no. I said, would you try to call him? He's not responding to me. So she tries to call. She texts him and there's no response. And then the next phone call I get is his girlfriend said, I'm here. There's cops everywhere. There's a police car here. There's a fire truck here. There's ambulances here. And they won't tell me what's going on. And then, I don't know, it was probably a half an hour after that, she called me hysterical that he was gone. He was gone. And, of course, my world just fell apart right then and there. And so I jumped on the next airplane back to Dallas. And that was probably the lowest I've ever felt, because I had to get in uniform to travel back, because I was there on a trip. And, of course, my eyes are just completely bloodshot. My face is all swollen from crying. And I'm getting on an airplane full of people that was delayed waiting specifically for me, because I reached out to the captain and I said, I am not going to make departure time. And my son just killed himself, and I've got to be on that airplane. And he texted me back and he said, we will not leave without you. And so I called an Uber and set that up, and I literally raced through the shower to try to clean myself up and make myself look presentable, just tossed everything in the bag, put on my uniform. And when the Uber lady showed up downstairs, I said, how far is it to Atlanta from here? And I knew it was a long ways, but I was basically asking her how quickly could she get me there. And she said, I can probably do it in 35 minutes. And I'm looking at my watch going, well, that's 20 minutes past departure time. And I said, if you can get me in there in the next 15 minutes, there's $100 tip in it for you. And she said, oh, honey, I'll have you there. And I said, okay. And it's funny to think about now, but it's a wonder we didn't get killed on the way, because she was down the sides of the road and everything, 100 miles an hour in this car, once I told her what was going on. Then the TSA tried to give me trouble at the airport because I didn't want to go through the usual location for the pilots. I wanted to go through just where the regular employees were, because I didn't have time to walk to the other end of the terminal. And so I basically laid down the law to them, and I, not that I'm anybody to lay down the law to them, but I just told them, I said, I'm going through here with or without your permission. And the manager of the station came over and explained to them what was going on. So they let me go through. I get on the airplane. There's everyone there. The airplane's full. They see me come on, and I'm just emotionally a basket case. I get on the airplane and I just put my head down in a corner, and we can't get to Dallas fast enough, you know. And I get there. His brother, we've flown him in from LA. I had to wait on him to show up, and then he gets there, and then we had to, of course, the 45-minute drive home. My wife and my daughter are here waiting on us. You know, we had to notify the rest of the family, including his mom, and then now comes the process of making arrangements. And so we decided to do it back in Keller because that's where he had grown up and all of his friends were. And so we made all the arrangements. We decided to have him cremated and put in the veteran cemetery there in Dallas. And so we brought his uniform out. I had his uniform, so we brought his uniform out and had him put in his uniform. He was an organ donor, so there was only a handful of things, I guess. Something about with suicide, they don't really want the organs depending on what happened, right? And but they told us what they had taken, and we were happy that he was able to contribute to someone. And anyway, so it takes nearly a week before we can even do the visitation, just because of COVID. And so we put the word out, the announcement and everything, that visitation was going to be on this day. And it began raining. Now, it was only supposed to be like from 6 to 8, okay? And because the place shut down at 9. I think we walked out of there about 11 o'clock that night. Well, a lot of people said it was because he had so many different families. For example, he had my side of the family, and then he had his mom's side of the family, and then he had his paintball family, and then he had his army family, and then he had his newly discovered passion of dancing and all of his bar friends and family, you know, as well. The guest register showed over 500 people came through that night. It got almost tedious towards the end of shaking hands and callous, people saying, "I'm so sorry for your loss." After that many people walks through and hugs you and cries, and you know, and I'm not, listen, I'm very grateful for that. I'm not trying to sound ungrateful at all. But it was a long night. And the next day is when I began to reflect on that. And I said, wow, he touched that many people. You know, that many people this young man was 28 going on 29, and that many people showed up just for the visitation. We can't let that die on a vine. And there was another friend of mine who had lost his daughter, and he started a scholarship in her name. And I wanted to do something similar. So I was thinking, well, what can we do? What would we call it? And then that's how we came across the name Cloud Dancer, because we thought, well, he liked flying in the clouds and he liked dancing. So why don't we call it Cloud Dancer? There was a movie at one time I remember as a kid called Cloud Dancer. So let's just call it the Cloud Dancer Scholarship. And the idea will be, you know, he was struggling financially because the VA had cut out some of his payments with COVID, and he was still wanting to fly and stuff. So and I knew that the VA wouldn't pay for the private pilot. It only kicked in after you got the private done. So I thought, well, that would be our mission. That's a great mission. We'll bridge that gap for these guys so they don't have to worry about getting their benefits to get where they want to be in life. And we'll take that stress off their back so they don't have to worry about those things. And so that's how it got going. And it was originally funded mostly by friends and family, you know, 100 here, 100 there, 500 here, 500 there. And before you know it, in 2 or 3 months' time, we had, you know, $5,000 or $10,000 in the bank. So we was like, okay, we got to get the 501c credibility going. We already had the nonprofit formed in the state of Texas, but now we need to get completely official, get a business account going, and keep this thing moving forward. And so that's how that was the seed that was planted that started this thing. And then from there, dealing with the grief of the loss was a day-to-day process that got easier over time because my focus was no longer on losing my son. My focus now became on honoring his memory And that was a job in and of itself that kept me motivated and to a large degree task saturated. I didn't have time to grieve. I had to make sure this thing was successful. I was not going to let it die on the vine on my watch. And so my grief became my passion to make this thing work. But
Yes.
don't think that there's not days that sometimes I sit around by myself and I'm not struggling myself with the loss. Still, just playing that video for you earlier in the pre-show brought tears to my eyes, talking
Yeah.
about how we got this thing started.
Yeah. I think it's important for people, whatever you're dealing with, is this stuff never leaves you. You're never going to be, whether it's PTSD or grief or a loved one, it's always going to be there. And the kind of goal is to just be slightly better than yesterday. And if you can keep moving like that. And I love what you said, because having a sense of purpose, a task and purpose every day when you wake up in the morning is critical to your mental well-being. And if you don't have that task and purpose, go out there and find it, figure it out. And for me, I was lost for a while, and this podcast is actually kind of filling that void for me. And so you've got to get out there and figure it out. And I think for Cloud Dancer, I think it's and for the folks that aren't from Texas, that we're talking like country line dancing, right? That when we talk about dancing.
Well, line dancing, but he wasn't a line dancer in that. Okay, so
or is it two-step? We're talking Texas two-step. Is that what we're talking?
Yeah, amongst other things. Line dancing is kind of downplaying country dancing. A lot of people look down their noses at the folks that do the line dancing because it's all choreographed moves, right?
Right.
Ashton could take any girl, that knew how to dance, and they could and immediately they would mesh together on the dance floor. And the particular club that he went to was in the stockyards was called PRs. And the owner of that place contacted me, and he said, "You have no idea the profound impact that he had on my club. These young men and women were showing up just to watch him dance and to learn from him. And we have numerous videos. I don't know where this passion for dancing came from him, but once he mastered it, like I said, he was very athletic. So anything he chose to participate in, he was always excelling in it. And we have numerous videos of him teaching young men and women how to dance, all the various country dances and the moves and the spinning and so on, in apartments. They would just gather up in apartments on a Sunday afternoon and turn the music on, and he would be teaching the girls all the different moves. Or when we have another video of them out on the lake one day, and they're on a pontoon boat, and he's teaching them how to dance on the pontoon boat, that kind of stuff. So he whatever he chose to do, he was very passionate about it. And so yeah, the dancing, line dancing would be kind of an insult to what he was doing.
Well, that just shows my ignorance of when I was out in Texas last month. We were down in the stockyards, and there was a dance floor at every bar or saloon we went to, and people were two-stepping and all kinds of stuff. And you see it in the movies, and people really do wear cowboy hats and walk around with the belt buckles and the boots and the whole nine, and you kind of feel it down there in the stockyards. And my wife's always wanted me to get some Wranglers and some tight Wranglers and a cowboy hat, but
the Wranglers would be old school in today's society.
Yeah.
You want Ariat or cinch if you're going to be modern.
Oh, Ariat. Yeah, that's my daughter used to ride Western, and that was the whole thing, is Ariat. And then when we moved to Florida, it's mostly there. I mean, there are Western horse folks around, a lot of ranches here in Central Florida, but a lot of people ride English if you're horse folks. But yeah, Ariat. So actually, when I met Thomas, he had a Ariat hat on. He was wearing an Ariat hat. So, and now with Cloud Dancer scholarship, I love the mission. I think it's well timed. Are you tied in with any other bigger organizations that can help funnel candidates, or how do you find the candidates that you use to give to pay for their scholarships? How do you get those folks?
So our first year in operation, in our infancy, if you will, I reached out to a guy named Eric Sebastian that ran a group called RTAG.
Yep.
You familiar with that group?
Yep. Oh yeah.
And so we explained to them what we were trying to do, and he's like, "That's great. We will help promote you. Can we send some of our guys your way?" And we're like, "Absolutely." And in the very first year that we gave out scholarships, we gave an RTAG. We made sure that an RTAG member was one of our recipients, who is now, by the way, a member on our board of directors. Okay, so he's come a long way, and he's also has made his way into the main lines at American. He's a 7.3 FO as well. So he's kind of our success story. Like, this was one of our first recipients, and this is the road that we helped pave for him, if you will. But yeah, we notify them. Roll Call is another organization here in the local Texas area, and we got involved with them through one of their members, Don Graves, who is the sole remaining survivor from Iwo Jima. He's 99
Wow.
this year. I went to his birthday in May, and he came last year to our gala, and he was a corporal Marine, and he sang "God Bless America," but not before he spent about 5 minutes getting everyone at that gala all riled up. So he's a hoot. Really love Don, and he's planning on coming back again this year. And then after that, it's really just, social media platforms, the website, word of mouth, a lot of word of mouth. And then our union, American Airlines union, supports us. Dream Flights is another organization that I work with a little bit to try to support them. And of course, they turn around and help promote us as well, And then Thomas Trejo, our mutual friend. It's funny, you were mentioning at the beginning of the show, how small the world is, and every little niche that carve out, if you will. That he and I, you and I were both friends of his. Thomas was an American Eagle pilot originally. He remembered me from way back when, and we wound up getting connected through another guy that he knew that he was working with. And then he says, "Well, I need to introduce you to Thomas." And then when I met Thomas, we get to talking, and he's like, "Yeah, I flew at Eagle. I was on the ATR." And he goes, "You were the Saab guy, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, that was me." So he remembered me, actually.
I'm pretty sure Thomas never met a person that he wasn't immediately best friends with.
Right.
I mean, he's that kind of guy.
That kind of guy.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, back to that point of, how small the world is, when we were talking earlier about, the tragedy of, and moving forward and through that, it was amazing how much smaller the world became. The number of people that came to me and said, "I lost a child also." And it was some people that I had been knowing for a long, long time that had never, let on to that effect. In other words, I'd been knowing these people for years and never knew that they had lost a child. The only person I knew at that point in my life that had lost a child was one of my aunts, who the baby was born and died shortly after birth, And so this guy came to me and he said, "Joey," he goes, "the pain never goes away. It'll always hurt, but it gets easier, and there are brighter days ahead, but you've got to find a purpose in this, And I told him what I was doing. He said, "Well, it sounds like you found your purpose." And he said, and then sometime later, we were having another discussion, and I knew that this person was a counselor on the side. He was an airline pilot, first and foremost, but he was ex-Air Force, but he had gotten his counseling, and he used to come. We would fly together, and he would, I'm not going to say complain, but he would talk about, some of what he considered to be silly issues, marital counseling and things like that he was dealing with, with these couples and stuff. He wasn't disclosing any private information like who it was, but just telling me like some of the issues that he sees and hears, these couples and so on. And he'd laugh about it, telling me the funny stories. And I guess, I don't know if he was trying to be a mentor to me, like, don't let this happen in your marriage kind of deal or what. But And it was later I found out that the reason he became a counselor was because he wanted to try to help people from taking their own lives because his son had committed suicide. And I thought, wow, that was, mind blowing. I had no idea, number one, that you had lost a kid, and I had no idea that that's why you chose to become a counselor on the side. And he said, yeah, I had to find a purpose to do something with that. And so, that being said, moving forward, now it becomes my opportunity to pay it forward. And I had a friend call me about a month and a half, maybe 2 months ago, and he said, he goes, I've always looked up to you. You helped my brother get on at the airlines. You've been his mentor all along, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought, okay, what do you want? Why are you calling me up and blowing me up like this kind of deal? And he said, no, I need your help. And I go, okay, what happened? And he goes, his son just killed himself. I went, oh my gosh. So I said, okay, well, I will do what I can. So I called up this friend of mine um, at his brother's beckoning, and we began to talk about it. And he was telling me weeks afterwards, all the issues that they were going through, him and his wife, the struggles they were having. Um, he had a young boy, and the mom was no count, so she was nowhere in the picture. And so now Gary was going on about um, he wanted to let his daughter adopt their grandson, so because they were unable to have children, and he thought that was a great idea. Let the child go live with his aunt, let them become his adoptive parents, and they can raise him. Gary was kind of I'm not going to say he was being selfish, but he was not in the right state of mind with this line of thinking, probably due to the grief. Whereas he's like, we were empty nesters, and now all of a sudden I am 50 plus years old, and I've got an 8-year-old moving in my house, and he was referring to his grandson. And he said, my wife and I are having a lot of trouble with this because she absolutely does not want our daughter to adopt our grandson and raise him. And I said, well, Gary, did you ever stop and think that maybe she lost her son and now she doesn't want to lose her grandson? And he goes, yeah, but we're empty nesters. And again, I don't think his line of thinking was well thought out, just because of all the things that he was dealing with. And he went on to say, there were so many things that he wished he had done with his older son before he died. Like, he goes, I missed all those birthdays, and I missed all these opportunities to go fishing and the recitals and all those other things that we talked about that airline pilots go through, that you miss, that you can't replace. Yeah. And I said, well, Gary, maybe this is the good Lord's way of giving you that second chance. Okay. Maybe this is his way of saying, okay, you missed all that with your son. He's gone now, but your grandson's in your life, and you can make up for that. You can be the father you always wanted to be to your grandson, to your son through your grandson, vicariously, so to speak, right? And I said, that sounds like to me, that's your mission. This is what needs to happen. This is how you're going to get through this. This is going to be your purpose in life. You're going to make up for all that lost time that you feel all this grief and remorse over having not spent with your son, who wound up taking his own life. Now you have the opportunity to do it all over. And not many of us get a chance to do a do-over. And you have that chance to do a do-over with an 8-year-old who's sitting there, loves his grandparents to death, doesn't want to be away from you, clinging to you every freaking moment. This is your opportunity. And that was my advice, going forward, based on what I had been told from the guy prior to me. You've got to find a purpose. And I said, I think your purpose has already been well defined. God laid it out for you, man. He's giving you a second chance at life to go and do the things with your grandson that you weren't able to do with your son.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, I'm assuming he received that well.
He did. Absolutely did.
I think that's great advice for anybody that's listening to this, that's gone through this. And I think that's wise beyond everybody's years. And what's next for the foundation? I know we've got the gala coming up in October, but where do you see this going, and what can folks do to help you get to where it needs to go?
So obviously, I won't be around forever, and although I would like to see this thing last beyond me, that's going to take a lot of work. Um, Building it up. We're laying the foundation for that to happen right now. So we've not been given any endowment. We're essentially creating our own endowment. We're giving away a significant amount of money, $50,000 a year in scholarships, um, which is probably one of the larger aviation scholarships out there. Most of the, if you look, there's not many of them that throw out $10,000 at a person, and do it annually, kind of a deal. So my goal is to basically make this thing self-sufficient, because there'll come a point in time where I won't have the time or the energy or the physical ability to run it like I'm doing now. And this is where I will rely on my successors to come in behind me and keep this thing moving, from a business standpoint. In fact, we're already having those kinds of discussions now about, right now, goodwill will take you so far, but eventually you're going to have to start paying people to do work. And
Right.
we're reaching that point rapidly because, we hit almost 100,000 in our first year, and then by the end of the second year, we had exceeded $250,000. And today, even after having paid 2 years worth of scholarships and basically got the Gala paid for, we're sitting on almost $300,000 in the bank. Now, of course, a lot of that money will be to pay the balance of the Gala and to pay off the scholarships, as they complete. But the money that comes out of this Gala will go into that fund that currently is generating about $7,000 or $8,000 a year in interest. So when it reaches a point where it's generating $10,000 a year in interest, we have hit self-sufficiency, because without lifting a finger, we can generate one scholarship a year at $10,000. The idea would be where it will generate 5 scholarships a year without having to lift a finger. That's going to take some time, but we're well on our way to reaching that goal.
Yeah, and the pilot shortage isn't going anywhere, from at least from my corner of the world.
No, it's probably another. They're estimating well into the 2030s. I'll retire in 2031, so I've got about 7 years left, and they're saying this will go up to about 2034, 2035. This shortage, before things will kind of taper off. Now that's assuming we don't have another black swan economic event between now and then.
So looking ahead, is you've got the Gala coming up on October 12th. We'll link in the show notes where you can go to purchase tickets. Is there a way folks can give if they are unable to make it out to Fort Worth on October 12th? Is there a place they can go just to donate if they would like to?
Yeah. On our website, we have lots of links on there for getting involved, volunteering, that type of stuff. We actively seek volunteers. We have a link on there that says, what do you want to volunteer for? And then we'll list what we have coming up. And I'm very much a believer in, scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, or vice versa. I'll scratch your back if you'll scratch mine, kind of deal. So we have appreciation parties for our volunteers. I throw those at my own expense. We just had one this summer we did a crawfish cookout back in April. It generated about $8,000 in revenue for us. I had roughly, a dozen people that were helping out. And I was like, all right, we're all going over to Jimmy's house and we're going to swim and cook hamburgers and hot dogs and drinks are on me. Come on out and have a good time, and Jimmy gets the jet ski out and we get the floats out and we just have a day at the lake, for all the volunteers. It's just show up and have a good time. This is my appreciation, giving back to you, for helping me. Each year at the big Gala, we sell those tickets that are $250 a piece. But each volunteer gets to participate as if they were an attendee as well. So yeah, they're working the event, but at the same time, we buy them. Well, we don't buy them; they're donated. But Ariat this year is one of our sponsors, and so they're providing all the volunteer shirts. So they're going to be wearing Western shirts with Ariat down the sleeve, our logo on the chest, and that kind of stuff. And they get to keep that at the end of the night. And then Oftentimes we'll have some stuff left over, and we'll notify the benefactor that gave it to us. Say, hey, we had this left over. What would you like for us to do with it? And they'll give it to your volunteers. We're like, okay, great. So they benefit in that respect as well. But as far as people contributing, yes, we have a number of links. We have all the different media, Venmo, PayPal, Square, Stripe, that type of stuff. We're running our silent auction through a thing called Give Butter this year. It's an online app that will handle all the silent auction. You can actually contribute through that as well. But just about all those links are on our website.
And that website is clouddancerscholarship.org. All together. And the black tie and boots is October 12th at the River Ranch Stockyards. Doors open at 6 p.m. If you've never been to Fort Worth in the Stockyards, I can tell you it's a good time. I had a great time there. I enjoyed it. And for the folks that might be interested in actually coming, Thomas kind of corrected me. There's Texas black tie. Is Texas black tie or black tie and boots different than a normal black tie event?
Oh,
or
yeah.
are they? Yeah.
Yeah, it's vastly different than what you would anticipate. So we do still have people that will show up in their tuxes and stuff like that because they see the word black tie. But Texas black tie or formal, Western formal, generally means you're wearing your starch jeans, your high-end cowboy boots and hat, your press shirt, a blazer and/or sports vest of some sort. For the women, it's generally it's their chance to show off, right? So they've got their really nice dresses along, their pointy toe, tall heel cowboy boots, all sequined in rhinestones and such, and their different colored hats. We had a girl last year. It was a really pretty outfit that she had on it. So it was almost like a prairie style type dress. And then she had on these blue turquoise boots with designer cutouts in them and everything. And then she had on this turquoise blue hat with a feather. It was a really unique look, So that's what the women like to do as far as their attire is concerned. But the men it's real traditional to wear starch jeans, a Western shirt, and a blazer with or without a tie. Some wear ties, some wear bows, some wear bolos, and then some don't wear ties at all. So yeah, it's much more comfortable, but it's still dressy.
Now you're somewhat of a musician. Do you play at this event? Do you get on stage?
I do. So I've been playing a variety of different instruments since a young age. I started on the piano, but I play the piano, play the guitar. Those are probably my two prominent instruments, and then also can play the accordion and the harmonica. And in high school, I played in band as well. But the first year we did a tribute song to Ashton, and I played a piano, and we had a girl sing to that. And then last year, a friend of mine who was a violinist and a fiddle player, he came out and we did a country rendition of Amazing Grace with tribute dancers because Ashton was such a dancer. So we sped it up just a little bit, put more of a country swing to it, and then they danced to it as a tribute to him. And then this year, my wife will never see this podcast, so she'll have no idea, but the tribute is to her for having put up with me through all of this, and just standing by me. So we're going to do a tribute song to her, and I'm actually going to sing this year. And the band is going to back me up, hopefully cover up all my mistakes and errors. But nonetheless, that's the plan this year.
I think it's going to be great and awesome. And I think it's going to be a special night. It's October 12th, River Ranch Stockyards down in Fort Worth. So for all the folks that live in the DFW area, support. This is a really worthy scholarship, and for most of the people that listen to our podcast are military folks, and there's a lot of the guys that get out, and want to pursue a career. This is a great. The country needs it. If you're looking for help to finance your flight training, this could be the way. I don't think you're accepting applications for the rest of this year. When does the window open up to apply for it? Is it just go to the website, or how does that work?
Yeah, it opens up each year in May. and we have it open for about 90 days. So May, June, and July. And then August and September, they kind of start narrowing down the field and make their selections. The biggest problem that we run into is trying to, sort through them all, because we do get quite a few applications. I think we had 65 last year. We didn't get quite that many this year, but it's still it's not an insurmountable task. But we have 6 or 7 people on the scholarship selection committee. I don't participate in that. I'll leave it entirely up to them. And there's an essay and there's some other stipulations that they have to meet. But as I was saying, the biggest part of that is making sure we're not giving money to someone who already has a license. There's a lot of misnomers there. Like if you were a pilot in the military, you can come out and do the military equivalency. And so there's a little bit of a misunderstanding there, and it's probably because we're not doing a good job of explaining it to our veterans who are applying for this. It's like, because we'll get the application that says I'm a pilot in the Air Force, or I'm a pilot in the Navy, or something to that effect. And so we have to clarify: are you truly a pilot, or were you a Wizzo or a load master, or what did you actually do? Were you a captain, a commander? If you were an aviator, then you're not going to qualify, because you don't need our help. All you need to do is take the MEC test and or MCE test, and then go to the FAA, and they'll hand you your commercial certificate. So we're trying to get the guy, albeit officer or enlisted, that was not an aviator in the military, is coming out, is choosing to go into that career field, and then finding out that the VA won't cover their private pilot. So even if they went to a large flight school, they're going to find out, shockingly, that when they get there, I've got to fund the first 10 or 15,000 out of my own pocket before my VA kicks in.
Nonprofits fill a really big hole for at least a lot of veterans. I know a lot of, for myself even. And I think, and I'll never skip a chance to bash the VA. I think the VA does a horrible job at what it's supposed to be doing. And the fact that you're able to bridge that gap really, and you see it, you get all the scholarships, right? So it has an impact. And I think nonprofits fill that gap for us. And whether it's learning to be a pilot, or with the Reveille Guitar Project, learning to build an acoustic guitar, or the Horses for Heroes thing, where you go out for 40 days and learn to deal with horses and ranches, and like all these things have their small, well, I wouldn't say it's small, it's actually pretty significant impact on people getting out and transitioning. I think it's really important. That's kind of why I like doing this portion, is because we can get the word out. I mean, we might only be able to reach a few people, but it just takes one person and you change their life forever. So I think it's really important. And I think
it is. And I want to, if we don't mind, before we wrap this up tonight, I want to circle back to when we were talking about the early beginnings of this organization. You said, is there any other places that, that have helped you? And I was thinking in the early years, we went with the RTAG group, but shortly after that, another very prominent, and maybe you're familiar with them, maybe you're not, organization is Dana Bowman, his operation, and it's called Halo for Warriors. And what Dana does is, if you don't know who he was a sergeant first class in the Army, and he was a Golden Knight, and he lost both of his legs in an accident.
Yeah, and I actually met Dana when I was in high school. He gave the speech to my graduate. I actually called him at Fort Bragg and said, I was, 16, 17. And I met him, came to I was in military school. He came to my military school and gave our graduating class speech. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I do know Dana Bowman. I'm sure he doesn't remember me. That was in 1995. He came to our school and gave us
lifetimes ago.
Yeah. You were like 2 or something, but
probably not even.
But stellar individual. And
he's been very, very influential in helping me network. Dana's been doing this for about 20 some odd years. And the way we got connected was someone had mentioned that there was a guy that was putting on this veteran appreciation was was how it was described. Oh, it's an appreciation day for these veterans. And I said, oh, well, what can I do? And they said, well, they're going to be, giving them helicopter rides. And I said, well, how about I take my steerman over there and I'll give him riding this old warbird of mine. And so he was all about it. So we wound up meeting. Turns out when I go meet Dana, he says, I know exactly who you are. He goes, you gave my son a check ride as a designated examiner some number of years ago and failed him. I went, oh my gosh.
Oh no.
And I said, Dana, I'm so sorry. I said, I do remember that event briefly. And I said, what can I do to help get him back on track? I said, where's the kid at now? And so anyway, we became best of friends, and Dana has helped me tremendously with wisdom and insight and networking for sure. And as such, I have turned around and reciprocated by helping him and bringing my people to him to help him with his event now that he does every year in March. Dana does a weekend for warriors. He brings them in for 4 days of fun. Usually about 40 of them. They shoot guns. They do helicopter rides. They go drive dragsters and race cars, and they go out to eat. They just have a really, really good time. And then there was one other organization that I wanted to bring up as well, because I feel like if I don't tell, I'm going to try to make sure I don't miss anyone, right? Because I didn't do this all on my own.
Right.
There's another guy by the name of Jay Pelican, or Pelicone, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And Jay runs an operation here in Dallas-Fort Worth. It's called 100 Vets That Give a Damn. And what 100 Vets That Give a Damn do is they meet quarterly, and they invite 3 other nonprofits to this event that they hold there at the American Airlines Museum in Fort Worth, and allow you the opportunity to explain what your organization does. And so we were one of the invitees in our second year of operation. And so we got to go and set up a table and lay out all of our brochures and tell our story, very much like we're doing here, to his attendees. And his attendees are all influential veterans, people that have money, right? And so towards the end of the night, after you eat and drink and they kind of talk, they have a presentation, then each organization, a representative from the organization, gets to stand up and make an appeal to the group why you should support us, right? And you get 5 minutes, and it has to be it's kind of an off script type deal where you just they call you up and you get up there and you talk. You don't get to use any audio visuals or anything of that nature, and you just plead your case. We are a good organization. Look at us. This is what we do. You should support us. And then once the 3 have made their presentation, they leave, and then the group is then. I guess they talk to them about, hey, whichever one you like the most, you can write 1 check, you can write 2 checks, you can write 3 checks, but we're going to collect the checks and then we're going to take a vote, right? And whoever gets the most votes gets the money. And so we wound up our year the quarter that we were there in 2022, I believe it was. We wound up getting the most votes that year, and Jay and them, we got about $5,000 or $6,000 that night, and Jay and them have raised hundreds of thousands of dollars as well. So he's a nonprofit that supports other nonprofits, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a really interesting concept. I never really thought of that, but that
It's
actually,
like Shark Tank.
Yeah, like Shark Tank for nonprofits. Exactly what it is. Yeah. Well, I think it's a noble mission. It's a great way to honor your son. I'm really excited that you're out there doing it. It's serving a purpose. It's much needed, and I can't thank you enough for coming on here, putting your heart out there. It's a difficult thing. Folks need to hear this. They need to hear that there's light at the end of the tunnel. There's something on the other side. It's not always going to be, it's never going to be the same. The world will never be the way it was when he was here, but we can honor him by this scholarship and give him purpose and getting the word out to other folks to check on your friends and check on your buddies. And hopefully we're never gonna prevent this, but at least we can try, maybe. So one last pitch. Is there anything else that you would like to tell the folks listening to this, or any words of wisdom that you got for anybody out there, that anything at all that you'd want to convey to everybody?
Well, I'm not a man of many words. I guess some people would say, and others might argue that point, but I guess our biggest concern right now is our push for our gala. So if I'm going to make a pitch for anything, it would be to try to sell that some more. Last year, we had a number of star power people there. So Eric Nelson from 1883 was there, Corey Pounds from Yellowstone, Joey Jingoli. Not his wife, Yolanda Hadid, didn't make it, but Joey made it. This year, we've got Gator from Yellowstone's coming again, Corey again, Eric again, maybe Buck Taylor. We don't know just yet. Buck's getting on up there. We're also going to have our veteran special honorable guest there, Mr. Graves, or Corporal Graves, Don Graves. He's going to sing for us again, and a host of others. So besides the fact that you're there for philanthropy, you're going to get to meet a lot of neat people. We bring in a really unique crowd, a diverse crowd, and we have a good time with it at the same time. So, and you find out that, hey, all these super rich people that are supporting these nonprofits, they put their boots and shoes on just like you and I. They stand them up and jump in, right?
Yeah, Tyler and I were just having that conversation about people put their pants on just like we do, one leg at a time.
I don't even wear pants.
Well, you're already one step ahead.
Yeah. I cut out the middleman.
Yeah, I like it. So the gala is October 12th, 6 p.m. The doors open, the Stockyards in Fort Worth, and it's at River Ranch. Did I read that right?
River Ranch Stockyards. It's off of 23rd Street. It's right next to the Drover Hotel. We had a special rate that was good through today. Now, because it's inside 30 days, they won't hold any more rooms for us, but you could still call the hotel and tell them you're wanting a room on the Cloud Dancer Gala, and they'll give you that special rate if there are rooms available. We have about a little over 100 seats left. We had 400 seats total. So we'll sell out. We've sold out every year. There's always a push, it seems like, about 2 weeks right before the event, and everybody's going, you got any tickets left? You got any tickets left? And that's when we have to start telling people, I'm sorry, man. We put these things out 6 months in advance, and y'all wait till the last minute to buy them. But we try to accommodate everyone we can. You figure there's going to be about a 10% no-show factor, which would mean about 40 people will no-show. So you oversell it by a little bit, and then that way the no-shows, you didn't lose anything. You were able to fill that seat with someone else.
Right.
A lot like airlines do on the airlines, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Calling me up to that desk. I don't want to hear my name before I get on an airplane.
Yeah. Or you take that
That's
buyout.
where I got that concept from, right?
Yeah. We know what you did there.
Smart. It works.
Well,
every time.
You can find Cloud Dancer Scholarship on Instagram, and there's a QR code. You can scan it right there. Also on LinkedIn, you can search LinkedIn, and there is a Facebook group as well. But probably the easiest way, if you really want to go over to clouddancerscholarship.org, and you can, all the information's there. And if you just want to volunteer or help, there's a little tab that says ways to donate. You can click on that, and it'll take you right where you want to go. So, Joey, I really appreciate your time. I'm going to hand it over to Tyler before we wrap up here. And then,
I just
Tyler,
wanted to say,
just
thanks for coming on, and thanks for sharing. I know it's really hard to continually relive these things, and it's hard to do it in front of people you've never met before, and it's hard to do it for an audience, right? But there's somebody who's going to listen, and it's going to help them. So I really appreciate you taking the time to do that, and it means a lot to a lot of people. So thank you.
Anytime.
Yeah, Joey, just to echo what the commander said, to
piggyback off with the
and this is a military joke, is that there's always the first sergeant and the commander, and they both do it to each other. One will put out information, and the other guy will parrot exactly what he said, but maybe he does his hands like this so people can't see me. I'm moving my hands. They say the same thing over and over again. So to piggyback off what the commander said over there is, we really appreciate your time. I think you're doing a noble thing. Your son is well honored, and I'm sure he's looking down on us, smiling, happy with what you guys are doing. So it's nothing short of amazing. And let's pay homage to your son and your wife too on this one. It's going to be a great one. And folks, head over there and give some money. Joey, thanks for your time today.
Yes, sir. Thank you
All
for
right.
having me.
Yep. We'll see you guys next time. For who do we have come? Well, we have Michelle Maidenberg. She's a psychologist. She's going to be up next on the show. We're going to talk about some stuff that we're not good at talking about, emotional regulation and things like this. So it should be pretty interesting. Tune in for that one. That's coming up next on Alone and Unafraid. Joey, thanks for your time.
Have a good night, guys.
See you.
Bye-bye.